The US says Russia is to blame for a missile that killed 2 people in Poland, even if it was fired by Ukraine.
This tragedy would never have happened but for Russia's needless invasion of Ukraine.
Hello there, I'm Laura Kyle. This is Aljazeera Live from Doha. Also coming up, Republicans win the US House of Representatives with a narrow margin. President Joe Biden has pledged to work with them. Families in Myanmar await the release of their loved ones after the military announces plans to free 6,000 prisoners, including 4 foreigners. And from teachers to security guards, we meet some of the volunteers giving their time to help make Qatar's World Cup a success. The US representative to the United Nations says Russia is ultimately responsible for a missile strike that killed 2 people in Poland. NATO and Poland say the missile was most likely fired as part of Ukrainian air defences. The issue overshadowed a meeting of the UN Security Council that was supposed to focus on the humanitarian situation in Ukraine.
While we still don't know all the facts, we do know one thing. This tragedy would never have happened but for Russia's needless invasion of Ukraine and its recent missile assaults against Ukraine's civilian infrastructure. The UN Charter is clear. Ukraine has every right to defend itself against this barrage. Defend its sovereignty. Defend its territorial integrity.
What a mockery of peace efforts that terrorists are still at the table on an equal footing with 14 members of the Security Council. One day after the gravest attack on Ukraine's critical infrastructure. While temperatures in Ukraine start dropping below freezing, these terrorists aim to deprive Ukrainians of electricity, water, and heating. More than 90 missiles targeted energy facilities and other civilian infrastructure in and at least 11 regions of Ukraine.
Kristen Salumi has more from the UN headquarters in New York.
Well, top of everyone's mind was the missile that landed in Poland, and many members of the Security Council used the opportunity to express their condolences to Poland for the deaths of 2 people there. They expressed concern about the escalation of the conflict and the escalation of the humanitarian situation as a result. And they got a briefing from the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, Rosemary DiCarlo, who pointed out that now 40% of Ukraine's electric capacity had been damaged. She said that Kyiv was only experiencing about 12 hours of electricity a day, and made the point that targeting civilian infrastructure in a conflict is illegal under international law, a point that was brought up by many of the speakers there. But Western countries and NATO-aligned countries in particular use the opportunity to call out Russia and blame Russia for specifically the death of the 2 people in Poland. They said that regardless of who fired the missile, it wouldn't have been fired if Russia had not invaded Ukraine in the first place. And we heard Russia push back against that notion in their remarks in the Council.
We have long ago stopped being surprised by your attempts in any circumstances, in spite of fact or common sense, to blame Russia for everything. And so today, in spite of clear evidence of Ukrainian Polish provocation, many representatives of Western countries have stated to the effect that even if the missiles were launched by Ukraine, it is still Russia who is to blame for destroying critical infrastructure.
Other news now, and South Korea says the North has fired a ballistic missile off the east coast of the peninsula. It's the latest in a series of launches in recent weeks and comes hours after North Korea's foreign minister threatened a fierce military response to US activity in the region. He also warned that a recent meeting between South Korea, the US and Japan would only lead to more tensions. Myanmar's military has freed 6,000 prisoners, including 4 foreigners. It's part of an annual amnesty to mark National Day. Tony Cheng has more from Bangkok.
The number itself is significant, and the occasion, usually the large prisoner amnesty occurs at Myanmar's New Year Festival, the Water Festival, which is in the spring. This is taking place on National Day. There are 6,000 prisoners being released today, including 712 political prisoners, and that's a significant increase from previous years. And as you mentioned, 4 foreigners, including Vicky Bowman, the former British ambassador to Myanmar, Sean Turnell, who was an economic advisor to Aung San Suu Kyi, and Turo Kubota, who was a Japanese filmmaker arrested a couple of months ago, and he was facing up to 10 years in jail. We don't know when they're going to be released exactly, but this news has been confirmed by the military spokesman in Naypyidaw, so it looks like it'll happen. They will be released and then deported immediately. And I think people in Myanmar have been expecting this for a couple of weeks. They think that Myanmar's military leaders are trying to empty the jails of political prisoners because they want to be able to say that the elections they're going to hold next year will be free and fair. It's probably a combination of both. Myanmar has so far resisted all attempts at international pressure to kind of ease the situation that's developed since the coup. This may be a small concession, but they are very clearly focused on those elections next year.
Authorities in Dominican Republic are deporting detained Haitian refugees. Gang warfare and political turmoil have fueled an exodus from the crisis-stricken nation in recent months. Many Haitians say they've built new lives across the border and are now being sent back home. Teresa Bow reports from the Haitian border.
It's become an all too common scene. Haitian refugees detained in the Dominican Republic. We met them in this military base in Dajabon, right at the border. They're being sent back to Haiti, even those who say they've built new lives here.
My husband works in a construction site and I was cooking at home when the police arrived. They wouldn't let me get my baby's clothes. I left all my money at home and I have nothing here.
Security forces here are telling us that most of these people were detained trying to enter the country legally, but some of these women are telling me that they have homes here and that their children were born in the Dominican Republic.
Mirlanda Pierre is with her 8-year-old son. She shows us his birth certificate that proves he was born in the Dominican Republic.
My son has a birth certificate. He was born here. They cannot send him back to Haiti.
The UN has called on the Dominican Republic to halt deportations. Haiti is in the midst of a political crisis that has gangs controlling large parts of the country. Thousands are fleeing. Lack of available healthcare services in Haiti have forced pregnant women to cross the border to deliver their children. But many are not allowed inside Dominican hospitals, and some have had their children on the street. Human rights activists say they're alarmed about what they call our President Luis Abinader's persecution of Haitians in his country.
There are massive deportations, and the cases are not individual. There's no due process. There's children with papers, others with just visas. It's just massive and a scandal. Even pregnant women being sent back to Haiti, and the law says that shouldn't be done.
The Dominican Republic is building a wall to protect its borders from smugglers, but also illegal migrants. Rubén Silies says his country is poor and cannot allow everyone in.
The only mechanism the Dominican Republic has is to show that it will not tolerate migrant irregularity or the deportations, and this is what we are doing. This has nothing to do with ethnical reasons or racism. That's another problem. If the state stops all deportations, we do not know what could happen here.
Haiti is facing its worst crisis in years. Human rights groups say its people are being discriminated against across the region. And they're asking the Dominican Republic, among other governments, for empathy for those who are trying to escape hunger, violence, and have no place to go.
Do you know where they're taking you?
Teresa Bow, Aljazeera, Dajabon, on the Haitian border.
Kenyan forces have arrived in the Democratic Republic of Congo to help in the battle against an armed group. More than 900 troops have been deployed to Goma as part of an East African regional force. The Congolese military is continuing to lose ground to M23. The fighters are widely understood to be backed by Rwanda, although Kigali denies the allegations. East African leaders are due to meet on Monday in Nairobi for the next stage of peace talks to try to end the fighting. Thousands of civilians continue to be caught in the violence, as Malcolm Webb reports from Goma.
Marie Gakuru says she ran for her life when her village was bombed. The rest of her family didn't make it. Now she cooks in this churchyard and sleeps in the church at night. A neighbour found her here and told her what happened to her son Makivendi, his wife and her 6 grandchildren.
They got in a car with other people so they could leave quickly. Then the car was hit by a bomb. His legs were blown off and he died. All the children were killed and their mother died as well at the same time.
This is Makivendi before it happened. The pictures taken of him after are too upsetting for us to show. Marie's one of tens of thousands of people who fled recent advances by the M23 rebel group, widely understood to be backed by neighbouring Rwanda, although Rwanda denies it. Most are now living in camps on the outskirts of Goma in Democratic Republic of Congo. This football stadium is now home for hundreds of people. Some of the older people here have run away from Rwandan-backed rebellions 2 or 3 or even 4 times before. But this time, some people here are asking why it's getting so much less attention and why they're not getting much help. Jean-Claude Kawaya tells people, it's tough, but don't be discouraged. These things will end one day. He's a community leader for this area. He blames the US, UK and France for supporting Rwanda and Uganda over the decades that their forces have waged wars here.
The war in Ukraine just started in February this year. The international community mobilized for Ukrainians because they don't want to see them suffering. But we have been suffering for more than 30 years, and the international community is behaving as if it's just animals that are suffering, as if we are just cows to be slaughtered every day.
Congo's army's been struggling to fight M23. People here have been wondering why. The government says the UN is stopping it from buying the arms it needs to defend itself from Rwanda. There are no UN restrictions on heavy weapons like tanks, only a notification requirement for small arms. 9 years ago, UN troops from southern Africa helped Congo defeat M23. This time, relations with the peacekeepers are at an all-time low. This convoy is escorted by Congolese soldiers after an angry crowd torched UN vehicles 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, the conflict's getting worse. Peace talks between East African leaders haven't helped. They're due to continue next week. For Marie, it's too late anyway. 8 people from 2 generations of her family are gone. Malcolm Webb, Aljazeera, Goma, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The US says an Iranian-made drone hit the Liberian-flagged oil tanker off the coast of Oman. The Pacific Zircon was struck by an armed drone on Tuesday night. No group has admitted responsibility for the attack. The company said the vessel sustained minor damage to the hull. Republicans have won 218 seats in the US House of Representatives. That gives them just enough to control the chamber, with 6 other seats still being counted more than a week after the midterm elections were held. The Democrats have 211 seats so far. US President Joe Biden has congratulated the Republicans and promised to work with them. But the win could give the Conservatives leverage to block Biden's agenda. Mike Hanna has more from Washington.
They will have control of the House now that we know that they've got that 218 seats, giving them the majority. But all indications is that it's going to be the slimmest of margins. If the Democrats win another 5 or 6 or even 6 seats, that will bring them to 217. The margin will be 1. But anywhere between 1 and 8 is a very slim margin. The reason for this is that the Republican Party is not a uniform House. There are many elements of it, particularly the extreme right wing, of which there are a large number, who may not go aboard with the agenda of the majority of the Republicans in the House. They are then able to block any such agenda. So even though the numbers are small relative to the number of the regular Republicans, so to speak, they would still have that power to block what the Republican Party as a whole wants to do within the House. Now, Kevin McCarthy today was voted in as leader of the Republicans in the House, but he still has to get confirmed on January the 3rd, when he will need to get at least 218 votes. Now, the problem with this is that today 30 Republicans voted against him. So if that was happening on January the 3rd, he would not be Speaker of the House. So all of these elements are there, all of these problems ahead for the Republicans.
Well, meanwhile, the US Justice Department will proceed with criminal investigations into Donald Trump, despite his bid to run for president again in 2024. Trump is being investigated for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results and for keeping classified government documents at his Florida estate. On Tuesday, he announced that he will seek the Republican Party's nomination for the next presidential election. Well, if Donald Trump is going to win the Republican nomination for president in 2024, it appears he'll have to do it without a powerful ally. Media tycoon Rupert Murdoch has reportedly withdrawn his support for the former US president. And as Gabriel Elizondo reports from New York, several Murdoch-owned publications are starting to reflect that.
I'm outside the headquarters of Fox News here in New York City. It's also home to News Corporation, the parent company owned by billionaire media mogul Rupert Murdoch. With Donald Trump announcing his intention to run for the presidency again in 2024, you might think that Murdoch-owned conservative media would once again be backing Trump's bid. But this time, unlike 2016, they're not. Just take a look at today's New York Post, a newspaper also owned by Murdoch. The front page almost completely ignores Trump, a very clear snub at the bottom of the page saying, "Florida man makes an announcement," not even referring to him by name. Last week, another Post front cover was even more scathing, calling the former president Trumpty Dumpty and blaming him for the Republican Party's disappointing results in the midterm elections. The Murdoch-owned Wall Street Journal has been equally critical. This editorial last week calling Trump the Republican Party's biggest loser. During Tuesday night's announcement, Fox News even cut out of the speech when Trump appeared to be rambling.
Jesse James, no. Eric Trump got more subpoenas.
Now we're going to go back to former President Trump when news warrants.
It all comes after Trump-backed candidates had a terrible night in the midterms, losing to their Democratic rivals in many key states. This is all a far cry from the days of Trump's presidency when he could rely on strong support from Fox News and the Murdoch papers. It seems that for News Corp, Donald Trump is yesterday's man, and that Rupert Murdoch has moved on.
Henry Olson is a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He says Donald Trump has lost his appeal amongst Republican voters.
Well, one of the problems with Trump is that we've heard it all before. That when Trump ran in 2016, he was not only a fresh bolt of energy, he had a fresh set of ideas that had either been dismissed or completely overlooked. Last night's speech was something that any person running for the Republican Party nomination would have been able to give, talking about priorities, talking about solutions. He's no longer the new kid on the block. If Trump wants to regain his mojo, I think he needs to have something besides looking at the past as the reason why people should look for him. Because if the question is about the future, there are younger, more vibrant, more acceptable candidates within the Republican Party that people will easily be able to accept. There's a lot of Republicans who want to move on from him. There's a lot of Republicans who adore him. And then in the middle are those people who could be happy with him as the nominee, but they would be equally happy with somebody else. And that's why Ron DeSantis leads Trump in many recent polls, and why he trails only narrowly in the ones that he doesn't lead in. Ron DeSantis is very credible to Trump voters as somebody who stands up to the media, as somebody who fights for conservative beliefs. He's almost 30 years younger than Trump, and he's also somebody who has shown a record of attracting the sort of independent voter that is alienated from Trump. If DeSantis runs, it'll be a very close race.
A man convicted of killing 6 people when he drove his vehicle into a Christmas market in the U.S. state of Wisconsin has been given 6 consecutive life sentences. Darrell Brooks was found guilty last month on all 76 counts for the attack nearly 1 year ago. The judge also sentenced Brooks to more than 700 years in prison to run consecutive to the life sentences. Now, for the first time in 2 years, flights have brought much-needed aid to Ethiopia's Tigray region. A delegation from the International Red Cross also arrived by road. It follows an agreement between the government and Tigray People's Liberation Front. The deal ended a conflict which began in 2020. Inflation rates in the United Kingdom have hit a 41-year high. The increase has been blamed on surging energy bills and food prices. The UK Finance Minister is due to make a statement about spending plans on Thursday. Jeremy Hunt is warning of tax rises and budget cuts, and those with disabilities are expecting to be particularly hard hit, as Emma Hayward reports.
George needs oxygen to help him breathe at night. His mum Gemma and stepdad Sean support him in every way they can. They've seen their electricity bills treble in recent months and have no way of cutting costs when it comes to life-saving equipment.
Our major concern is like the energy bills because of, electricity's gone up so much, and we have quite a bit of equipment within at home for him. So that is always a worry for me, and it's always like every month you think, how are you going to make ends meet? You cut back and you cut back and you cut back. We both work full time. Electricity, obviously for us, it is a lifeline. It is George's lifeline. Without his oxygen in the evening, he's going to become really poorly.
Gemma has been helped by the Family Fund, a national charity. It's now providing assistance to thousands more families in the UK than it used to, and says conditions for families with disabled or seriously ill children are deteriorating. Gemma and George's story is far from unique. Energy prices have been rising here for months, and inflation is at a more than 40-year high. And it is the most vulnerable in British society who are being hardest hit. And there are worries that as the government tries to balance its books, cuts could be made to vital services. Shani Danda is an entrepreneur and a leading disability specialist.
Pre-pandemic, we knew that disabled people face unavoidable extra costs of nearly $700 per month. This is after we've paid for our housing costs, whether that be your mortgage or your rent. It's a lot of money for people to have to find. So now we're in this post-pandemic world and in a cost of living crisis. I will put money on the fact that that cost now has really gone a lot higher. We need the government to really stick to the commitments that they made, to uprate benefits in line with inflation, and to give us more cost of living payment support.
A UK government spokesperson told us financial help is being made available, and in a statement said, "We know disabled people face additional costs, and this government is taking decisive action to protect the most vulnerable in our society." The government does face tough choices in the coming months, and so do the families who will continue to care, whatever the cost. Emma Hayward, Aljazeera in London.
Elon Musk has told remaining Twitter staff that if they aren't ready to go hardcore, they should leave the company. The new Twitter CEO is making employees sign a pledge to work long hours at high intensity and build a breakthrough Twitter 2.0. They have until Thursday to make the commitment or take 3 months severance pay.